Aloha, and thanks for watching this lightning talk as part of OpenEd 2020. My name is Billy Meinke Lau, and I'm the OER technologist for the UH Manoa campus, and this presentation is about open education and futures and technology that shapes our lives. Now, the basic premise of this presentation is that open implies the use of emergent technology, that our practices are being shaped by and are shaping technology, that none of this is neutral, and that we should seek to foster a free relationship to technology and to open. I hope to provide some useful context for our relationship to tech specifically, to open up possibilities and turn away from inevitabilities that might be ushered in by tech and by capitalism. Simply put, I'd like us to be more open by questioning open. A little more about me. My work with UH involves instructional design and playing with open source technology and instructional strategies. I also wear the hat of a doctoral student as part of the Hawaii Research Center for Future Studies, which lives within the Department of Political Science and was established by the Hawaii State Legislature in 1971. Jim Dator founded the center and is known for having described the four futures: continued growth, collapse, discipline, and transformation. He's also known for suggesting that any useful statement about the future should appear to be ridiculous. This may help us open up our imaginations to the idea of preferred futures. My research interests focus on power structures, technology, and law or policy that enable or hinder scholarly collaboration. I also can't look away from the ways students are handed over to capitalism through data surveillance, and so we'll definitely touch on that in a bit. This talk is less than 10 minutes long, and these topics can be intense, so please settle in and enjoy. Let's start by asking ourselves, what is open? We are at the OpenEd conference, of course. At the international level, the United Nations Universal Declaration on Human Rights and the Sustainable Development Goals both reference access to higher education. Your professional and personal interests probably align with the notion of improved access to education, and in an accelerating world, especially under COVID, how access is actually expanded is certainly worth examining. When we look at the mission statements of open organizations, we can see they usually seek to serve all people, to serve humanity. Openness in these frames is easy to consider as a silver bullet, a game changer, because it can be in some contexts. But lofty goals can obscure the complexity of this important work, and so we must dig deeper. Many of us do work in open because we value social justice, and this labor allows us to seek it in large and small ways. Access to devices and connectivity dovetail with open content and passionate educators and researchers who want to build sustainable, equitable futures through open. Open is changing the way we approach pedagogy, allowing us to reimagine learning and question our current practices around collaboration and about assessment and grading and around technologies we elect to use. As you can see, openness in education does not exist in isolation, but rather it is woven into our flows and movements and choices day to day. When we think about what makes our work open, there are attributes of open we can consider, and they often boil down to openness socially, technically, financially, and legally. These align quite well with the barriers to open identified by Larry Lessig and his pathetic dot theory. Having these buckets is useful when imagining futures so that we can differentiate between the barriers to openness that are external and those which come from within the movement. Failure to be more open can be criticized, and I'm no saint when it comes to critiquing capitalism in open education. Still, open washing has been a thing since before I was involved in the movement, and it's still around. Like being green, being open is popular, even if that means using the name to define work that is less than open. But open is also multiple, meaning different things to different people as openness traverses domains. Consider the tensions between the free software movement and the open source movement, where pragmatism and principles seem to be at odds. Or look at the tired MOOC phenomenon, where many of the major players champion openness, but put little or no effort in addressing the legal barriers to education. It's clear that the biggest MOOCs reach millions of people, but it's difficult to imagine the opportunities for improving human life that were left unrealized based on copyright decisions. Decisions about open can be made for a range of reasons, but closed practices within an open movement need to be thought through. At the same time, stewarding open and being part of the movement can be a complex task as we are faced with the reality of our reliance on platforms and operate within legal frameworks that morph and mutate, and we should be inclusive of folks who have the courage to rebel. To return to technology for a moment, philosophers have done their thing with technology, and we're fortunate to have a wealth of knowledge to build upon. But when you think of your own work in open and your technology choices, are you choosing technology that democratizes processes or centralizes them? Who controls the flows of information in your work? Are we only thinking about technology technologically? Martin Heidegger wrote about technologies revealed by the artisan and framing it and placing a layer of interpretation on it, forcing it into being. This revealing was seen as unavoidable and limited technologies being to what is useful to us. But Heidegger also emphasized the importance of maintaining a free relationship to technology and to never see it as neutral. Doing so would be tragic. We're charged with the task of questioning it unless we wish to be delivered to it in the worst ways. Gilbert Simondon spoke to the continuity between technology and nature and how we humans bring form into matter. One can debate whether form exists before it is made tangible, but it is the technical skill of humans that concretize it. Simondon wrote of major and minor techniques, emphasizing that our relationship to technology would be mediated by all of us. He spoke of a balance that should be maintained, one which would emerge continually. If this seems a little abstract, consider the appearance of the mechanical clock. Lewis Mumford saw this as one of the most pervasive examples of technology on human life. Once introduced, the notion of keeping time became less of a contextual activity like rowing together or keeping time while playing music, and more of an entity that presided over the day from dawn till dusk. Mumford also engaged with the intersection of technology and capitalism, and though he considered technology to be neutral itself, he recognized how it is shaped and leveraged for wealth and power. Philosophers were thinking this deeply about our relationship to technology 80 or 100 years ago or more, and I'm glad of it. We now live in an era of expanding use of artificial intelligence and data-driven technologies, but as our capabilities grow, we have to consider the cost of new technology, and fortunately, we have some very smart people doing just that. Safiya Noble's research into algorithms has exposed how biases are built into the tech we use each and every day, reinforcing stereotypes and raising barriers to equitable participation in society. Virginia Eubank's work on data-driven welfare programs has shed light on the ways these technologies reinforce inequality and create panoptic webs of surveillance for those already living precarious lives. She describes this new surveillance as a spider in a web, testing each connected strand for suspicious vibrations. Nick Cernicek's work to understand and give name to platform capitalism has revealed the capitalist underpinnings of platform logics and dependencies. Never before have corporate entities been able to monitor, collect, process, and build value from our personal information at the speed and scale they currently can. And platforms are what make this possible. And Chris Gilliard has done an incredible job documenting the uptake of invasive tech in education since COVID, as the pandemic forced lots of instruction online. Perhaps the most disturbing thing I've come to realize is that anti-plagiarism software and proctoring software come from a place where we assume the learner is trying to cheat. Audrey Waters took this one step further, pointing out that decisions about what is suspicious are increasingly made by algorithms and less by humans. Are we, as the open education movement, positioning ourselves appropriately in relation to technology or to platforms? How reliant are we on technology and for-profit corporations? Is our openness limited to decisions about financial costs to student, or are there other costs we may not be considering? Criticality must be a central component of progressive movements, or we run the risk of stagnating and succumbing, stalling, and entrenching. One of my advisors, Deborah Halbert, suggests that researching futures can help us better understand how we colonize the future by assuming linearity and inevitability, and instead open up alternatives. Thinking about our current context and the open movement's technological entanglements, we might be able to avoid the worst case scenarios and cast preferred scenarios into the future. As a final thought, I'll leave you with a quote from Heidegger that's worth considering. The closer we come to the danger, the more brightly the ways into the saving power begin to shine, and the more questioning we become, for questioning is the piety of thought. So that's all for now, and I appreciate your willingness to sit with me for a moment and have your notions of reality challenged. Enjoy the rest of the OpenEd 2020 conference. Aloha.